issue of sports and what is now a public dialogue, the likes of which we've rarely seen. Let's say good day to Etan Thomas, who played 9 years in the National Basketball Association. Michael Eric Dyson, a frequent voice on our show, a sociologist, professor at Georgetown. His latest book is Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. It's a rare moment, gentlemen. Michael, have we ever had a conversation like this, a moment like this in the American moment?
Very rarely indeed, because what we're used to, at least in broader perspective, is that the bully pulpit of the President of the United States of America would be a place where we articulate values and sensibilities that are kind to victims, that are open-hearted to vulnerable people, that are compassionate to those whose backs are against the wall, and certainly those who are the victims historically of racial violence in this country. Even when presidents were not deeply attuned to the ideological and political consequences of race, they were at least open to the human face of suffering. This president, by amplifying the white supremacist logic of the far right, the alt-right, the neo-Nazis and the bigots who have accumulated around them, has done a grand disservice to not only this nation, but to the institution of the American presidency as well.
We hear a lot of voices, Professor. What do you make of sports' role in this? I mean, everyone's empowered to speak, but sports, everyone's stepping out, it seems.
Well, it is appropriate that those sports figures speak up. Excuse me. It is appropriate that they use their bully pulpit. As LeBron James said, I command a great deal of attention, and I use my platform to say in unequivocal terms that what we are seeing is wrong and that we have the potential to unify this nation. Sports, after all, become a forum within which we debate many of the ideals and principles and practices and behaviors of American democracy, because we know that on an equal playing field, no matter what your color is, no matter what your gender or sexual orientation, if you have excellence, you can achieve. So those principles are deeply embedded in American society, and as a result of that, those sports people, those athletes who have gained fame, also gain a powerful voice in the culture.
Yeah, Etan, certainly this is larger than sports. It's a unique moment. I want to get your take on the magnitude of this moment and sports' role in it.
Well, it's absolutely amazing when you look at what actually happened. So, President Trump came out and he pretty much justified the actions of the white supremacists. And he tried to compare them to Black Lives Matter and try to say that, well, they weren't really all that bad. They weren't all bad people. And, then creating an entire term, which is the alt-left, which is a fictitious term. There is no alt-left. There is no equivalent.
Well, there are anti-fascists that we've heard that new term posed.
That's a new term that was created, but you can't, it's not equivalent to the neo-Nazi, Confederate-loving white supremacists. It's not an equal term. So when he says that there's violence on both sides, no, there's violence on one side. So that's you can have different labels if you want to, but he's trying to try to make them seem like they're not as bad by saying, well, the left has their version of this, which is completely untrue. So having different athletes come out and speak out against this, I think this is great. You have athletes who have the voice of, they have the ear of the media. They have, millions of Twitter followers. So when you see a LeBron James, as you showed it earlier, and he came out and he said what he said about President Trump, and you saw the comments afterwards, and so many people who didn't agree with him said immediately, no, why don't you just stick to basketball? No, he shouldn't just stick to basketball. He has the right to be able to voice his opinion just like everybody else, not just when the opinion is something that is the same thing that you believe.
Yeah, Etan, it occurs to me, and I looked these numbers up, within about 1 million, and at that point it doesn't really matter because of magnitude. LeBron and President Trump have about the same number, 37.5 to 36 million Twitter followers. I mean, that's a telling moment here. I would think in the national zeitgeist that these two men are just about equal, out there having equal digital voice.
Right, but what you hear is to shut up and play again. You hear for Colin Kaepernick, everybody is okay with athletes speaking out and saying what they believe in until they say something that they don't agree with. Then it's like, no, you need to just stick to what you do. And actually, I applaud the guys that are continuing what Colin Kaepernick pretty much started. You know what I mean? Michael Bennett and Marshawn Lynch, even though he's not choosing to, talk about it, just by him making the gesture, just by Malcolm Jenkins continuing to make the gesture, he continues the fact that athletes can use their platform, and they should.
You mentioned Colin Kaepernick. Michael, everyone has a voice in this moment, it seems, for the most part. Kaepernick's was a lonely voice just about 12 months ago, almost exactly this weekend when this all started. What do you think this moment, this dialogue, this focus will do to the other issues that we have seen in sport over the past year?
Well, it proved that he was prophetic, number one. Colin Kaepernick put his neck on the line when it wasn't easy, when there was no surrounding culture of bigotry that permitted what he said to be amplified in positive terms. People denounced him. People said that he was un-American. Donald Trump himself said he ought to go somewhere else. Donald Trump, the very arbiter of the anti-democratic, unpatriotic sensibilities of white supremacy that wants to secede from the nation. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and all of these Confederate people that he defends. So now we have Colin Kaepernick, a true patriot, who was supported by even some veterans in this nation saying the reason we went to war was to protect the free speech of people like Colin Kaepernick. So hopefully the NFL will catch up with Colin Kaepernick. Because let's be honest here, Bob, the NFL is constituted by many people who support Donald Trump, whose polite bigotry, whose nice liberal or conservative racism puts them in accord with Donald Trump. The NFL has been slow to deal with issues of domestic violence, and it certainly has not dealt with the serious regard that should be in place for African American life. The NFL is nearly 70% black players, but again, there's a white hierarchy that prevents the flourishing of certain players who choose to be political. And the fact that Colin Kaepernick has not yet landed a job has nothing to do with his on-the-field skills, with his ability to chuck that ball pigskin down the field. It has precisely to do with his courage. And I hope now that the nation will see what he did is so extremely important and valuable and find him a place in the NFL and others find their voices.
Etan, how do you see this entire moment out of Charlottesville and the president's comments teeing things up generally for the National Football League and social issues as we just are, 1 week into the preseason?
Well, football players are awake. You know what I mean? And you saw that last year with Colin Kaepernick. It's interesting because I just finished a book called We Matter, Athletes and Activism. And I actually interviewed Dr. Dyson and a lot of different athletes. And we talked about this very thing. And you're seeing athletes really being able to use their platform in a way that you haven't really seen since the 60s.
And what was the great inflection point? What was the great, what bent the course there?
Well, I think a lot of the police killings, you know what I mean? A lot of the killings and the murders by the police of unarmed black men. And it's so interesting because you're seeing after this weekend, I saw on different news stations, on MSNBC, on CNN, a lot of these people, who happen to be white, who were like surprised that racism still existed. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, what has your head been in the sand? I mean, right now, today, would have been Terrence Crutch's 40th birthday. You know what I mean? It would have been his 40th birthday, but instead he was murdered by Betty Shelby, and of course she got off, and she has a new job. But this is a pattern, and if you can't look at these cases and not think that racism still exists, so yeah, you're looking at everything that happened in Charlottesville, and the thing about it is these aren't just people who are now going to go back into the backwoods and chew their tobacco and stuff like that. These are lawyers, these are policemen, these are coaches, these are teachers, these are fathers, these are people in everyday life that we see and come in contact with every single day. These are people who make the laws. You know what I mean? So yeah, racism still exists, and for athletes to use their positions to call out that racism, I think it's really commendable about it.
And we are seeing it across the political, across the various leagues and every part of the spectrum weighing in. We could continue, but we have to answer to the clock. Etan Thomas, Professor Michael Eric Dyson. Gentlemen, thank you. Good of you to spend this time with us today on Outside the Lines.